Welcome to this episode of Sexuality After. Joining me today is Rose Cooper. She,
Hello.
she has been a print journalist for over 20 years, and she's currently a performance activist and creator of The Eloquent in the Room, which is a blog, podcast, and a band. And she totally rocks rainbow suspenders.
You've
I
been
love
peeking.
those suspenders.
Oh my gosh, best dollar bin thing I ever came across. I love
bet.
them.
Yes, they're super cute.
Mm.
Well, could we start by you giving a brief overview of your life? That might be hard to do, but just so people can get a feel of who you are.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm the youngest in a big family, and had a complicated childhood, resulting in childhood trauma, and was therefore an underachiever in high school. And I had a lot of insecurities, and due to being a teenager in the 70s and having old-fashioned parents who were more like grandparent age to me, my only ambition that was given to me was to get married, have kids, leave home. So I did that. So I got married at 21. And when I was pregnant with my second child, I decided to do a correspondence course in writing. Actually, someone sent me a coupon. And the coupon said on it, if you don't make the cost of the course back in proceeds of sold writing work, they'll give me my money back. So I took that on. And just before I finished the course, I sold 2 articles and made my money back. But I don't think a lot of people finish the course. I think it's a bit of a scam in that way. And then became a freelancer. And at the time, like the first time my first article was published, I never, ever, ever in a million years dreamed that anything like that could ever, ever happen to me. And it's terrible because as much as I love my children, I really, really love my children so much. They are everything. They're my whole life. But I think I still look back on the editor calling me up and saying, yeah, we're going to publish your piece as one of the happiest moments in my life.
Yeah.
Up to that point, because I did not see myself as being someone who could do anything creative. It just wasn't in my vernacular. And over the years, I've taken on other creative things. And now, by the time I was 40, 45, I could not imagine not being creative.
Yeah.
But that marriage lasted 15 years. And then a couple of years later, I got married again, and that marriage lasted 15. Actually, they were closer to 16 years. So I have a lot of life experience in regards to long-term relationships at different stages in my life. I had 2 children with my first husband and 1 child with my second, all grown men now.
Yeah.
But before the first marriage, between the 2 marriages, and after the second marriage, I had a lot of casual sex. And the reason why I started the podcast is a lot of it is because I've seen a sliding back, a regression of female sexual empowerment. And the way I gauge that best is by the fact that the casual sex I had and the fact that the men I was having sex with in my mid-30s seemed to have a lot more of a clue and a lot more consideration for my pleasure. And the guys I was having sex with after my second divorce, I was in my early 50s and I was still having sex with guys average age of between 25 and 35, because that's who's out there wanting to have sex with people my age. People my age want to have sex with women younger than me, funnily enough. But yeah, it's just the general obliviousness to the pleasure aspect of it and the communication aspect of it and the zeroing in on what kind of kink things might I be into and all of this stuff. I thought, whatever happened to, I don't know, just let's see if we have chemistry. Let's So it's left me with a really bitter taste in many ways, because I was always 100% satisfied by sex in my older years, but only because I was actively looking for it and expecting it and talking people through it. And and I would have conversations with young women, and they would be talking to me about their lack of satisfaction and their self-consciousness about their bodies.
Yeah.
And it would do my head in. So that's where I'm at now with the eloquent in the room. Is it's led me down an interesting path into intersectional feminism. And the community on Instagram, for instance, is just so inspiring and powerful and motivating. And I've learned so much, but I feel like I've got my own bits and pieces of information that might be slipping through the cracks here and there, just because of my age and the fact that I've had this unusual life experience as far as
Yeah.
sex goes.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. 100%. I love it.
Cool.
That brings up a couple questions already that I wanted to talk to you about. So you were saying that you think that the cluelessness of guys in today's day is at least largely in part due to women's lack of sexual empowerment.
I
Because
believe so.
because
Yeah.
you like approached these guys to have sex with them, and then you kind of had to teach them or walk them through it.
Well, how Tinder works. I'm sure everyone knows how Tinder works and stuff, and people would ask questions. And I felt like a shopping list presented to me by most
Mhm.
people who were having conversations. Do you do this? It's like they're ticking this list. Are you into this? Do you do this? All this sort of stuff.
Yep.
And I find myself halting people in their tracks and saying, well, firstly, that's not how you start a conversation. And I know that we're having this conversation around casual sex, but I have I know exactly what I want and exactly what I need, and it has nothing to do with this kind of conversation that we're having now. As far as I'm concerned, sex is a no-brainer. I don't go into it because of, like I say, because of life experience, and particularly being in long-term relationships. And all the studies show women who have experienced long-term relationships do have a higher orgasm ratio than people who haven't.
Yep.
That's just because women need to build up trust. And if they haven't already learned about their bodies, they learn about their bodies during the course of a long-term relationship.
Yep.
Just because your body does what it does, and just because trust is what it is. So, so I was like, I really like sex. Like, I really like sex, and telling people, let's just have sex. Let's not worry about what I do or what I don't do.
Yeah.
And sometimes that would result in a really friendly interaction, and people were really, really respectful. And still, it would be like me just if that we live in this heterosexual dominated patriarchal idea of what sex is. So you still find yourself, particularly in casual sex, I guess, going through the motions of this is what the goal is, to have intercourse.
Yep.
But I would be like, okay, you've clearly watched porn and you understand that women have a clitoris, but reaching for it 2 seconds after you start kissing me is not the correct way to go about things.
Yeah.
So I'd just be slowing people down and making sure they do things at my pace. And afterwards, sometimes I'd get contacted again. Sometimes I wouldn't get contacted again. Sometimes I'd want to see them again. Sometimes I wouldn't. But more often than not, a lot of people would say to me, oh, like a surprise. Like what I was doing and the way I was behaving was coming across to them as a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it wasn't like a theatrical thing on their part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, I don't know, when you make someone pay attention to you, they have no choice but to pay attention to you.
Yeah.
And I don't mean pay attention to what I want necessarily, to pay attention to how I'm behaving and how I'm reacting to the way they touch me.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if, I think younger women these days, because of porn, kind of, if they're unfortunate enough not to have come across thoughtful lovers in their life, will approach sex as a performative thing and think more about, does he like my lacy underwear? Are my tits big enough? And all these other concerns. And I remember having the same concerns when I was really young, before I was luckily disabused of it pretty early on, and realized that enjoying sex was the main thing rather than hiding any part of my physical appearance or apologizing for it,
Yeah.
any of it.
How did that shift for you?
At the beginning?
Yeah, from, being more performative about it to actually what's really important is that I'm enjoying it.
I think, it was, I was like really thin and geeky looking in high school. I never got a second glance from any of the boys and stuff. So my approach to sex back then was very romantically inclined, and so I didn't really have a lot of experience until I grew into myself. So I was like 17 with my first boyfriend, and I remember apologizing because my breasts were small then. Then I went on the pill and they grew several cups overnight. And it was just, he knew what he was doing. He knew what was up. And when this sort of all came together a few months after we started having sex, and I actually had started having orgasms and things, I'd at least had that experience in that relationship for a year. And then the next time I had sex with guys, we'd have sex, and afterwards they would think it's over, and I would say to them, you know that I didn't actually have an orgasm then. I'm still like only like 17 and a half, 18 at this stage. And this would sometimes result in them never calling me again because I guess they were embarrassed or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think 2 or 3 guys down the track, I met one guy who was obsessed with cunnilingus, and he had me on the dining room table, and it was several times a day, and he was insatiable, and he knew what he wanted, and he made me feel like me being open to receiving pleasure was the biggest gift I could ever give him. And I was like, okay, well, more of that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I came to, I don't know, be persuaded by the positive rather than the positive of how much a man enjoys my enjoyment than I was about opening my legs in broad daylight or whatever. I overcome it all pretty quickly after that. Yeah. Because I was fascinated by sex. I was fascinated by orgasm. I was like, how many of these can I have? How big can they get? I was like really scientifically interested in it.
Yes. That's really beautiful. I'm really glad that you had some lovers that just made you feel like your pleasure was the biggest gift that you could give to them.
Absolutely.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to our previous conversation briefly, how would you articulate female sexual empowerment?
That's a good question.
How would you define it?
I feel like just the word empowerment is different to entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think men have sexual entitlement rather than empowerment. And I just realized that just a second. But I think in a nutshell, it's just the belief that anybody who expects to have an orgasm as a result of being with me should 100% expect the reciprocation of that, and that it's a shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
So in feeling that I was like, I did have experiences as a young person and sexual abuse and things like that, that made me feel like a receptacle more so than anything else. And that's a lot to do with youth and bad education and just bad upbringing, all that sort of stuff. But I don't know at what point. I think it was just because I was able to be in a long-term relationship. I think that's the difference. Unless it's an abusive long-term relationship, just by being with someone and considering that sex as recreation is something that you both have to put effort and imagination into. And I think for most of my first marriage, I built up a bit of a fantasy life in order to meet his libido at his level. But the consequence of that was I did just become more and more orgasmic throughout that relationship. And that in and of itself is an empowerment, is learning what this instrument is and being able to play it.
Yep.
So I feel entitled to enjoy sex. I feel absolutely privileged to give enjoyment with sex. But over and above all of that, I've learned what this body can do. And I think women aren't especially focused on, wow, what can this body do? They don't go into sex going, what can this body do? And my biggest motivation is to say, who knows?
Yeah.
The sky's the limit. Every time you think you've figured out all of the different nuances of things, it's always going to surprise you. Just because if you're always on that curious journey and you're always sort of into it because it's good for you and healthy and gives you a really great release of tension and all that sort of stuff, it's a really, really positive thing. There's nothing not positive about the act of having sex, unless you don't feel that you're being respected and seen and sharing the experience. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-mm.
So would you say then that sexual empowerment is knowing your body and loving your body's capacity for pleasure and knowing the value of your own pleasure when you're with a partner?
Yeah.
Would that sort of summarize it for you? Is there anything
Yeah.
else you would add?
I think I'm, even though in my own way I've always been sex positive, the sex positive movement, the fourth wave, has given me an interesting outlook on the idea of the enjoyment of my own physical body as an expression of my love of life.
Yeah.
I would I would add to that. So I would add that now, and I feel really lucky to be alive, I got to say, because I've seen some aspects of feminism exceed my wildest expectations, particularly intersexual feminism and what it's done for me in opening my eyes.
Yeah.
But the sex positivity aspect of it is, for me, if I happen to get my tits out on Instagram or whatever, I'm doing it because I'm like, fuck, I'm alive. I'm
Yeah.
happy. I'm 60, nearly, and my health is still reasonably good, and I'm really happy to be a woman, whatever that means, and I'm happy to be an out and proud bisexual woman, and all of the things. And I'm like, they're not just a pair of tits; they're mine.
Yeah.
And I had babies and all this sort of stuff. So my empowerment and my appreciation of myself just as a miracle of nature that has less to do with aesthetics and more to do with self-love.
Yeah.
Just pure unadulterated self-love. And I can get very emotional, like it does as soon as I start to talk about self-love and self-worth. It gets caught in my throat.
Yeah.
Straight away, because it's been a lifelong journey to get to there.
Mm.
Enjoying sex is one thing. Loving yourself is a whole other experience. Put the two together,
Yeah.
and it's
It's
a great thing.
fireworks.
Yeah. Except I'm a celibate right now. So.
But
But
that can
you
be
can't have
an
everything.
yeah, but that can also be an amazing way to explore self-pleasure and everything that your body can do on your own too,
Yeah.
especially
I'm
when
an
it's combined with self-love.
absolute advocate of all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I love that you brought up the love of life or I don't even know. We don't have a good word for it in English, but I find
Joie de
that
vie.
yes, which is not English though.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Mm.
I find that to me, sex and sexuality, obviously they go hand in hand, but I can easily touch base with my sexuality on a day to day basis without having sex. Like I don't need to have sex in order to be a sexual person or connect with my sexuality. And when I do connect with my sexuality, it's far more than just having sex. It's like this, it's this vibrancy and this aliveness
Mm.
and this, it's like,
It's an energy, isn't it?
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
like the
Mm.
ability, like having sex gives you the ability to create life and have children, right? Like in a very kind of DNA, human
At a
way.
cellular level,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
thank you, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I think sexuality as an energy is like it's the same thing. It gives you the push and the desire to create and to be a part of life. Like it's about
Mm.
life as a
Mm.
whole, not just having sex.
Yeah.
No, you get
Yeah. It's I was talking we both know you got you heard about me through Wyoli's Sex
sex
Stories
stories.
podcast,
Yeah,
and we were talking about that creative energy or that erotic energy being part of our creative journey too. And it's no coincidence that while I am celibate at the moment, I'm creating like a son of a bitch,
yeah,
and I definitely feel, sexual energy coursing through me creatively,
yeah,
um, because any form of self-expression can't not be erotic if you're a sensual kind of person. And we take so much for granted. We take our own skin for granted. Just we take our own hands for granted. We take so much for granted that's tactile about being a human being. Mm.
absolutely.
Mm.
Um, so you mentioned that you believe that men often feel entitled to orgasm or to sex. I forget exactly what you said. What would
Well,
it look like?
I feel that the patriarchy. I'm trying to not assign it to men specifically, but patriarchy
Mhm.
has built a structure that sees one thing as the AC and the other thing as the DC.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the way that we couple electric currents is a male and female thing. The whole idea that we are built the way we are built to accommodate the way they are built, but we are secondary to that.
Right.
So that entire notion has been fused into our DNA for the last couple of centuries. And of course, men are going to have an orgasm. It's like, ha ha ha. Like obviously, there's a lot of men that do have difficulty or hesitancy or anxiety around orgasm, and certain um, drugs can affect it all and all that sort of stuff. So it's not that it's 100% guaranteed, but premature ejaculation is extremely common. Like
Yep.
it's their trigger mechanism is easily accessed, whereas ours is something we have to decipher. But once we've deciphered it, the the ability to orgasm and
Yeah.
the time in which it takes to orgasm isn't really that different.
Yeah.
But you just have to know your own code.
Yes, yes,
Mm,
absolutely.
mm,
I don't think entitlement is probably ever as satisfying or fulfilling as empowerment. And
mm,
so for men, if men feel entitled, um, and their main focus is like, oh, I want to get off as fast as I can or whatever, that's not as deeply fulfilling for them as it would be to be sexually empowered. So my
mm.
question to you would be, what does a sexually empowered man look like? And do you feel like you've slept with some? And what is that like? Like, what do you see in a sexually empowered man?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Good on you. Like, I have to think about that. It is a really interesting question because, having been in long term relationships and having different dynamics there, I can't say that I experienced their empowerment, but I have experienced empowerment from men in my life that was about their own understanding of and enjoyment of taking their time and being that respectful person and being able to um, be extremely enthusiastic about my pleasure, but also be able to lay down, relax, and allow for me to be that person and be the giver as well. Um, and I feel the entitlement. It's whoa, we're going to get a bit light bulby right now, but I feel entitlement has obscured men's ability to have empowerment, true
Mhm.
empowerment, because riding parallel to entitlement is a lot of shame around sex.
Mhm. Yep.
And particularly men have a lot of shame around sex. The anxiety, that performance anxiety that they have. I don't know if there's a female equivalent to the same degree, but I know that if I was a man and I was intercourse focused and I had any anxiety about maintaining an erection, that would be hard. That would be really, really hard. And men aren't very nice to each other about this and talking about this and calling each other names and all this sort of stuff. And for me to, I think I would equate empowerment with a man who is really, really okay with the fact that because he does tend to ejaculate quickly, that he understands that, okay, well, to begin with, this is going to be all about you. And when you're completely satisfied, I'll be so worked up, and that's pure and utter that's really satisfying for them. And I never felt like I was ripping anyone off, or it was out of whack or out of balance or anything.
Mhm.
Um, the pure enjoyment of their masculinity is being the bringer of the great sex, is giving the orgasm. I think because men are so achievement oriented, that's where they get their empowerment from. I could be so wrong about that, Phoebe. I could be way off base, but like I say, I think entitlement is and patriarchy and all that sort of stuff sort of obscures that embodiment that men would desire more if they were more aware of it. And I'm seeing it in the media, and wonderful people men who are writing books, and men who have changed their lives and gotten into a real spiritual version of sex and gotten into tantric sex. And it's such an elevating, wonderful thing for them. And you meet people like this, don't necessarily have sex with them, but I've met people like this in my life going to different events and things, and you just see people that ooze sensual presence, and you don't feel like in a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, you don't feel like the Roadrunner turning into a chicken dinner in front of their eyes while you're talking about sex. They're completely respecting you and seeing you as a human being, and you could talk about sex and it's fine. That, to me, that's male empowerment. They're not looking at you like, okay, you're here to satisfy me.
Mhm.
We're here to share something, and it's not that common, and
Yeah.
it's like the holy grail, I think, for me personally, is
Mhm.
to meet someone who's like wants to share who I am as a human being and all the stuff. But I don't think people come at sex with that sharing thing in mind. They
Yes.
come at it with the taking it in mind.
So I kind of hear there, like in our conversation about empowerment and men, that there is again an aspect of knowing your own body as a man. And in both cases, with when we talked about women's and sexual empowerment and men's sexual empowerment, it's like you talk about the give and take of a sexual interaction, maybe more focus on men's empowerment for it to be equal, for them to be a little bit more aware of the giving part, and for women to be a little bit more aware of the taking part. But that
Hmm.
it's like, yeah,
Give,
there's really
yeah,
something there about it being a mutual human experience, instead of just like, what's this one thing I want to get out of it? Or
yeah. It's
it's
hard to
like,
distill, and the absolute best person I can recommend about this giving and taking and receiving is Betty Martin
okay.
and her book, The Wheel of Consent, which isn't exactly what it sounds. It kind of sounds like Wheel of Fortune. Will she say yes? Will she say no? But it's actually understanding the difference between giving and accepting and taking and allowing. Women do a lot of allowing during the sexual exchange,
Mhm.
and we might enjoy it, but for the most part, we're thinking more about what we're giving in regards to the pleasure that the other person's receiving, and it interferes with a woman's pleasure. And likewise with men, they can be so preoccupied with giving that they're not really zeroing in on their actually, it works both ways, but a lot of it is seeing what they want and taking it, and not necessarily seeing that sometimes there's a really fine line between enjoying giving something so much that you are giving it more for your own pleasure than for the person you are that is receiving it.
Mm.
And I think this is sometimes where people are at cross purposes, particularly back to Tinder. A lot of guys will put on their profile, "I'm a wizard with my tongue," or
Right.
some shit. Yeah. And they almost knock you over in the rush to go down on you. And it's I should be drawn and quartered probably for saying this, but not every woman wants to be knocked over and gone down on
Yeah.
instead of other kinds of foreplay
Yep.
inside of that first 5-10 minutes
Yep.
or whatever. It's like, but we've distorted a lot of the meaning behind of a lot of what is giving and what is taking, that men do actually seem to want to, or the patriarchy does want us to give men badges that they can actually wear in public to say, "I give good head." And they think that women will just throw themselves at them for that. Um, I can't, yeah.
So if both parties went into a sexual experience with the thought, what kind of experience are we having
Mm,
together?
mm,
For women to include themselves in that equation and for
mm.
men to include both parties in that equation. Like, do you think that would kind of help distill all of this conversation into a question that people can ask themselves while they're having sex in order to kind of bring that into balance?
Yeah. Again, with the sex positive movement, where it's in the vernacular, the word normalize. And we definitely got to normalize having conversations over dinner. If you're actually
Yes.
know you're going to hook up, have all the conversation before you even leave the restaurant.
Yeah.
Because the moment, the moment of sexual enjoyment and all that sort of stuff could be so heightened, and it's not just men that get frustrated. It's not, it's a high stakes game for some people, and their entire emotional capacity can be compromised in that moment. Sex can be a
Yeah.
tremendously affecting thing,
Mhm.
and a tremendously vulnerable thing for people. And it's easy when you get to my age to sort of kind of forget that until you meet someone who's only supposed to be a hookup, and then you have this amazing connection and you feel all these feelings come up and you go, "Oh shit, that wasn't in the brochure. I'm crossing a boundary here. I'm feeling all these feelings and stuff, and I'm expressing all this energy towards this person, and that's not kind of what they signed up for." So we have to learn to understand ourselves and safeguard ourselves, and just having conversations around what your boundaries are
Yeah.
is great. What your absolute rock hard no's are. Rock hard
Yep.
probably being a bad phrase to use,
Yeah.
but yeah, just eliminate the possibility
Mhm.
that someone can transgress something that could be not only a deal breaker but somewhat traumatic
Yep.
for
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we got to just talk about all that sort of stuff. I feel like it's the wrong thing for me to want this, but I would really love it if people did their experimentation less with other people than they're currently doing. But it seems to be that's how we learn about sex.
Mm.
Because sex education isn't that great, because porn is misleading, we stumble in the dark from person to person and learn about it that way.
Yeah.
And that's such a lottery, and that's so potently
It's true.
able to cause more harm than good. So the more we arm ourselves with our own self knowledge, the more we slow down There is nothing wrong with having sex with someone on the first date. There's nothing wrong with having sex within 5 minutes of meeting someone. What's wrong is doing it for any other reason than you really, 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 really want to, and you know exactly what you're going to get out of it, and you know exactly where you are in that space, and you know yourself.
Yeah.
You've got no, there's no moral bullshit about it. It's but if you don't have experience, there's also nothing wrong with saying, can we do things a little bit slowly or whatever, and normalize that being perfectly fine.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yes.
Rather than check out this new underwear I just bought and serve yourself up like a dish on a plate. And if they're giving you compliments and saying you look really hot and thanks, you're awesome and you're so sexy, that's sometimes a young woman's version of having a good time. And it breaks my heart. Mm-hmm.
What makes a good lover?
Self-awareness, sensual enjoyment, someone who actually does have affection in their genetic makeup, and subtlety, absolute subtlety and nuance, and the idea that anticipation is at least 80% of sexual enjoyment, and someone who's not afraid to be seen and have eye contact and all that sort of stuff. Even if you're signing up for a one night stand, why not take the big tour? Let's take the plane and go to Paris in our heads as a metaphor for sex, rather than just riding your bike down the road, as the two extremes of a luxurious enjoyment of the experience that you can have with someone without necessarily, you don't have to be in love, but you can be in love with the idea of two human beings enjoying sex to the maximum potential that two human beings can enjoy it.
Absolutely. Cool. I love that answer. Thank you.
Yeah. I love, if I may, if it's not too out of line, I love watching you listen to me, because I'm seeing you sort of go,
yeah, totally.
It's kind of feeding your cell memory, and you're like going, yeah, all of that, cool.
Yep, more of that, more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly what's happening. Awesome. In your podcast that you did on sex stories, your sex stories podcast interview, you were talking about the casual sex part of your life. I'm not sure if you are referring to both when you said this, or just the first time that you had a lot of casual sex, but you said that you weren't proud of that time of your life. I was wondering, is that kind of because okay, I know this is not true actually because of who you are, but is it because of that society kind of expects you to feel that way? Or is it something that present day you would not approve of? Like there's some aspect of it, or why do you feel that way?
Yeah. Very much the latter. Because in the 70s, I rejected all moral bullshit around the double standard to do with casual sex. I felt completely okay with that, and I thought if anybody wanted to hurl a label at me and call me a slut, I was like, yeah, and so it was never.
Yeah.
So I never felt shame per se, but looking back, I remember how much of the way I approached just being out there and going to pubs and meeting guys and going to parties and meeting guys and all that sort of stuff, how much of me wanting to be noticed, wanting the attention, wanting to be kissed, wanting to be wanted was just about me hoping to find someone to take me away from all the stuff I had going on inside me that I wasn't
Mm.
able to acknowledge at the time. So just the idea that I would hook up with someone just by sheer virtue of wanting to hook up with someone, having a big crush on them, and being the last person at the party with that person awake, just talking to them, hoping that they might kiss me at the end of the night, not realizing that they're like, oh, she's still there, may as well. That's pretty much what was going on their side. But me, I'm going, I've seen this guy around and I really like him. And if he wants me, then my life will be solved in some way.
Yeah.
So a lot of, I can't really say, there were some one night stands that I went into knowing that that's what they were, and either just put it down to a good experience or a not so good experience or whatever. It just took all ownership of all of it and didn't feel bad about it, but just thought, that wasn't, I could have done without it. You know what I mean? But for the most part, it was mainly just because I was a great gaping wound looking for all the band-aids in the world through
Exactly.
wanting to, yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Would
Mm.
you s would you say that the second time around that you had, casual sex, which was later, like in your 50s, that it was
Well, the
different?
second time I was in my mid-30s.
Okay.
Yeah, between marriages. And that was equal parts libido and ego. So we separated when I was 35, and ask any person turning 35 and they kind of think they're getting older and it's kind of freaking them out a little bit, particularly if they're a woman.
Yeah.
And I had two children by this stage, and I thought, who's going to want to have sex with a 35-year-old woman who's had two children? This is what I'm thinking. It was the mid-90s, almost completely disregarding the fact that I was a fitness fanatic and I went to the gym and I swam and I jogged and all that sort of stuff. And I was at my physical peak, arguably, then in regards to pulling power, going out to a bar and guaranteeing that I knew I could come home, take someone home if I wanted to. So, and that was all about for the first half of those 2 years that went on, was me not really understanding that I was thinking that if I'd go more than a week or 2 weeks without sex, that I'd have to go out and get sex because I was used to it, and my body was going, come on, we're on the clock here. Let's go. My body was dragging me out the door to go and get some sex. It was, it was really, my libido was well trained. But I liked the attention, and I liked the fact that most of the guys I would meet would be younger than me and blow smoke up my skirt about how much more interesting I was, and how talking to me was more exciting than talking to younger women. I bought all the bullshit. I just took it hook, line, and sinker. I look back and I think that all of it was lines, all of it was bullshit. People just wanting to get me into bed. But the end result was always fine and great,
Yeah.
and I had a great time.
It was kind of
And
about validating your desirability.
yep, all of that. And I was consciously aware of, particularly in the beginning, not wanting to fall in love. So I kind of, if I did meet someone who I kind of liked, I would make a point of going out again as soon as possible and meeting someone and sleeping with someone again, just to, keep this in perspective, Rose. You're just going out and sleeping with people. That's what you're doing. Love is a joke. It doesn't exist. All this stuff. I was so hurt and bitter, and I thought I'd been sold down the river with the whole what love is and all that sort of stuff. Therapy later, I understand it better now. But yeah, I was very overt in picking people up.
How do you pick people up at a bar? You must be like really good at it by now.
I don't. Well, now I wouldn't. The last thing in the world I'd ever want to do. But it's just no. I'm just not that person anymore. But at the time, because I knew what I wanted, it seemed less seedy than it does in retrospect, thinking about it. But you'd see a guy, and I'd be attracted to guys who were interesting. There had to be something quite interesting about them. So, for instance, one guy I cracked onto, that's an old expression, covered in tattoos, bald, had a piercing and stuff, and was a good-looking guy. And we saw each other across a crowded pub and sort of maneuvered our ways. And I was like, I love a man who will shave his head, not go with a comb over or that. You are rocking that bald head. And I had exposed arms. You could see I had tattoos on my arms. He goes, I love women who have tattoos. And we were kissing within the next 5 minutes. It was that quick. And other times where I just meet people during the course of events and things, as I was working as a journalist then. And so you go to parties and all that stuff and just hit it off with people. And when you're a grown adult in your mid-30s, if it's on, it's on. Yeah, and you kind of know that we will be leaving together, but we'll just enjoy the party, So, yeah, it's really kind of civilized as well as not so much.
Yeah. Less civilized later.
Mm.
So if you're not that person now, who are you?
Like
if you're not the kind of person to pick someone up at a bar now.
Yeah. And there's many reasons for that. There's the obvious reason is just I have way too much respect for myself and the other person to want to have sex for its own sake now. I just see absolutely no point. The only way I would see a point to it is if it was approached in a really, really specific kind of way. And if I was to imagine what that might be, is like if I went to a retreat somewhere and it was a meditative sort of thing, and I met someone who was clearly in the same headspace as I was, I would possibly negotiate a sexual experience with someone that I knew I was never going to see again, based on us both having this higher thought processes around it. But that would be the only sex for its own sake I'd ever contemplate, because I just don't see the point.
Sex for its own sake now is disrespectful to both parties?
Not as a construct, not at all. Not at all. It's just not where I'm at. Like I just, everybody have as much sex as you like with as many people as you like. Go to all the orgies, do the thing. It's fun, but I just think that gets to a point in your life where you can't unsee. Once you see people, once you have a lifetime of having sex, that is the greater part of it has been an intimacy, has been a love experience, has been a respectful experience. That everything else shy of that is just having an orgasm for its own sake. And I can have all of those on my own and not actually cross energetic paths with someone, and the risks that are involved with that. My heart, their heart, my sense of my anxiety, all these things, my physical well-being, all of these sort of things, because I'm getting older. And like one thing I discovered with the having casual sex post 50 is that one thing that I think people take for granted, and this is the entitlement thing, and particularly if you've been in a long-term relationship, people have this unwritten law around the intercourse deal that if the man wants to change position, he will do so without asking. He'll just jump up and do it and physically turn you. That happens. Or say you want to get on top, and before you have time to respond, it's happening. The idea of ongoing consent during sex is still a relatively new concept, but it wasn't. And I was up for it when I was 35 and fit, and we could do it hanging from the chandeliers and all that sort of stuff. But once you're past 50, you're really specific about the positions that you can't maintain for a period of time. You don't know the person, and if this is going to be a long session, you want to conserve your energy and your muscles and all that sort of stuff. So it's a very chill, have very chill expectations around
Yeah.
sex now. I mean, we could kiss for 2 hours, and that to me would be sex, and there would probably be orgasms happening during that. It's like it's a uh, it's a kindness. It's an intimacy of kindness to me now, because I am just a mature person who associates affection with kindness. Yeah. So I don't even want to kiss people. There was a time there I wanted to kiss everybody. I love kissing so much. I'm like, when can we start kissing? Who wants to kiss?
Yeah.
Totally into making out. And I'm like, yeah, just the idea of affection now to me is kindness and caring and nurturing, and I want all of that. I want to be loved up. So yeah.
Would you say then that, because you said that having casual sex for you right now would not be respecting yourself or the other person, and is that just because it's not what you want?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I drew the line in the sand about 3 years ago. Like I've been single for going on 8 years. So for that first 5 years, particularly the first 3 or 4 years, I was out there and enjoying myself, and I was getting crushes and having entanglements, and it was driving me batty, but I was having fun, and it was like the people that were disappointing. I still felt like I asserted myself in that moment, and would just chalk it up to, oh, it's a pity that didn't work out that great, but it wasn't because of anything that I didn't do. It wasn't because of anything I didn't say and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
I was just always,
totally.
I was in there. Yeah. So I have really strong reactions now. I think it's because of being played. You do get played a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, I was very flattered. So you get people that will play you because, you're an older woman, and they think, well, I'll just say nice things to her and I'll get the great sex and she'll be my slave. And you can see this agenda there. And it makes you angry.
I bet.
And I'm like, and I also notice that it's an expectation based on their previous experience.
Which
but
also
they would
makes
come
you angry.
Yeah, so that would come up. That would be a brick wall. They'd come up to a brick wall with me because they would say nice things, and I would sort of say, please, just don't say that. You don't even know me. You haven't met me yet. You think I'm sexy? Wait till you get to know me. I have so much self-regard now. But when I was 35, it was good enough that someone thought I looked sexy for me to go, yes, you're right. That's what makes me sexy. But now I'm like, if you like the way I look, that's because you have a certain taste in a certain kind of woman, but it's not because I'm empirically some kind of attractive person. I don't care about that.
Right.
But if people pick up what you're putting down energetically, I'm like, yes, I'm a sexy woman. Yes, I am. You're right. But that doesn't mean I'm suddenly really, really flattered
Yes.
by this. So it's like all the screens are down, all the artifices, all the bullshit. I've heard it all. I've felt all these things, and still, like, are you a fan of Amanda Palmer?
I don't know who she is.
Oh, she's a wonderful, wonderful musician and activist and stuff.
Yeah.
And she's married to Neil Gaiman. Have you heard of Neil Gaiman?
Mm.
Yeah. Well, he's a fabulous fiction writer.
Okay.
Yeah. And when those two came together, it seemed like a really unlikely combo. But the way she described the way they fell in love was like being Alice in Wonderland, dropping from a great height, and her dress pillows out like a parachute, and she drifts softly down to earth. And I'm thinking, I'll have what she's having.
Yeah.
Just to fall softly into a relationship with someone and have this mutual respect and mutual understanding, and none of the stupid stuff
Yeah.
that people do.
What do you want for yourself then sexually in 5 years' time?
You know what? I would never have believed it in a million years that I would be saying this to you. I'm like, I don't care. I really don't. I don't care. It'd be nice, I guess, if I had a nice, meaningful connection with someone, and that resulted in us having really nice sex, and I was still having it. But it's it's I would clock it with all of my other addictions. Like, I gave up smoking, and a year and a half ago I gave up drinking quite heavily. And I think wanting sex to the degree that I wanted it at times in my life was very much a human addiction to um, the soothing qualities of oxytocin and all of that stuff. So I have people in my life that I can hug. I can hug myself. I probably would settle for a kiss buddy if I could find someone who just wanted to hang out and kiss.
Yeah.
I would put that out there. But as for caring about my sexual future, I have no expectations, desires, or ideas about that. Anything would be a bonus, I think. That'd be nice. But I'm like so preoccupied with bucket list ticking of another ilk entirely, and that's just, having some sort of legacy to all of this. Doing this kind of interview and just being so bare bones honest is something I don't even do on my own podcast. Don't do it that much in my blogs or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a gift and a privilege and an opportunity for me to share with you now, because then I know it's out there. I can say, listen to that podcast because there might be something in it for you.
Yeah.
Because I'm really just vomiting truth at you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. After the life that you've lived so far to this point, with long-term relationships and casual sex and being really connected to yourself, sexual and your own sexuality, I have 3 questions for you that are all connected. So I'm just going to say all of them at the same time so you kind of know what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Given your experience and all the research you've done and talking to people that you've done, what would you say is the one biggest thing that you wish women knew about sex and sexuality, and the one biggest thing you wish men knew, and the one biggest thing you wish people in general knew?
Okay.
It might be all the same thing. It might be all 3 different things.
In the first instance, When I started my podcast, I did a series which comes in 4 parts, and it's called 2020 An Orgasmic Oddity. And I knew where I wanted it to end up, but I wasn't quite sure the journey I would take to get there. But I knew what I wanted to tell people about the secret. It's not a secret, but it felt like a secret because no one was talking about it. And that is that one of the most essential components of a fulfilling and more complete orgasmic experience is the ability to tune into your breathing and vocalizing during sex. And if you are having any difficulty achieving orgasm, and we all know that if we have bad attention spans or whatever sometimes, and you be with someone, and if you have to concentrate during the whole orgasm thing, if that's your jam and you have to concentrate and really zero in on it, and it's sort of like it's coming to you and then, oh no, it's not, you chase it away because you're distracted, or they do something different, or you do, just the absolute fleetingness of it. The best thing I could tell you at that point is to believe that it's there. You didn't chase it away. It's not difficult. It's still there. But you have to engage this vagus nerve system that's running from your brain stem through the middle of your body down to your cervix. And this amazing highway is potent as a amplifier, accelerator of orgasm. So that's the happy ending at the end of the 4 episodes. But the journey there, I still have to say, okay, forget all the cultural stuff that's given you shame. Forget all the bullshit that you've been told about penis and vagina sex. Forget all this. And what would a world look like if there was no shame and all that? So I take it on a meandering journey, and we go to bonobos and look at the matriarchal society that they've got going on, and they're having sex with each other all the time, particularly the females having sex with each other all the time. So they're a bisexual matriarchy. I'm like, we should all just down tools, walk away from the houses, and just go and watch bonobos. Every kid should have a field trip to watch bonobos and just go, okay, they're keeping them in line. And how are they keeping them in line? Everyone's having sex. Everyone's seeing sex as a comforting thing, as a de-accelerator of anxiety and aggression between males. Like, it's so bare bones. But when you look at your sexuality as being on that anxiety spectrum, and you look at your body as being this conduit of nerves and hormones and all that, and yes, the clitoris is absolutely fundamental, but its importance matters not a jot if you're not without inhibition, and if you're not tuning into the pathway between your mind, your emotions, your ability to just not just go, oh, am I going to have an orgasm, but just go see that orgasm, seize it, bring it to you, dance with it, and just go, like, you just really understand what it is. I don't think people really understand what an orgasm is, just that someone does something to you and that gives you an orgasm, rather than you realizing that your body is constantly in a state of an orgasm that is just waiting to be released from your body. Yeah. So to me, that's what I've learned, and that's what my body has learned. And it learned it pretty early on. And it was all about, I don't want to be in any way prescriptive that women have to be mothers or anything like that, but part of being pregnant and all that sort of stuff was a very sensual experience for me, and very orgasmic experience for me, and all that sort of stuff. So just looking at your entire body as potentially an orgasmic trigger, and roll with it, and give it all of yourself, give it all of your voice.
Mm. Your body is
And
in a case, you said your body is in a constant state of orgasm waiting to be released.
yeah.
I want a t-shirt that says that.
I can make you one. I can make you one. But yeah. And I sense that you already are that person. You give off the vibe that you guys have a really happy sex life.
Yeah.
And yeah. And that it's like, it's less of a, it's just a no-brainer. Every time you have sex, the, all the goodies are there waiting to be consumed. So what's your hurry? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. That, and I would say the same for men, to understand that connecting their emotional selves, their vulnerable selves, and that that same vagus situation, pelvic floor, all of that sort of stuff. It's all kind of the same. Yeah, don't be afraid. For men, I just say don't be afraid of making a mistake. Always ask. Always ask, not just for consent, but is this okay? Would you like it if I do this? The back to the wheel of consent, they have this game called the 15-minute game, and the game is two questions. How would you like me to touch you for 15 minutes? And how would you like to touch me? How would you like to be touched, and how would you like to touch? And the thought behind that process is the pleasure aspect of it is about you engaging what pleasure you get from what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of like guys, off the track here, but giving head. I don't give head to people unless I'm really into them. And when I do, and I'm really into them, I'm really, really into giving head. Like, it's because it's a powerful thing for me, and it engages the vagus nervous system. I didn't really understand this, but your face is involved in this vagus nervous system, your jaw, your throat, the whole 9 yards. So you can put a lot of energy and thought into enjoying it just as much as they do, or not just as much, but in equal measure.
Yeah.
But it's a gift. What you're doing, sex is a gift, and you're trading gifts, and you're opening gifts together. It's not someone throwing a brick through a window and taking what they want and running away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the first time that I gave a blowjob, and I was just like, I don't care if this feels good to you. I mean, I do, but like, I want to give you a blowjob in a way that I enjoy. Like, I'm going to give you a blowjob for my pleasure.
Yeah.
And like, he loved it, of course, but like, it was really interesting to do that. And I forget where I was going with that.
Well, you had the mindset of wanting to be not just good at it, but to enjoy it.
Totally.
And I think, yeah, I tend to steer away from the phrase blowjob too. I kind of like to say fellatio, I like to say cunnilingus, and or going down, or whatever, because if a guy says to me, give me a blowjob, I immediately think that this is a really one-sided idea, and it's a job. And he doesn't particularly care if I enjoy it or I don't.
We should change it to like a blow fun.
Yeah. And I've got an oral sex podcast as well, and part of it's me talking about cunnilingus, and the other part is me using what I learned from a book called Sex Tips for Straight Women by a Gay Man, which was written years and years ago.
Yeah.
But the article still holds up in regards to one golden rule apparently that women don't understand about a good head, and that's we like anticipation. We like to sneak up on it. We like to do things sort of slowly. Like, don't muck around. If you want to get in there and deep throat us or whatever, just do it straight up. Like, that's kind of like they're not really into subtlety so much. Some are, some aren't. But yeah, it's like being enthusiastic is a good thing.
Being enthusiastic goes a long way.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought up that 15 minutes of,
Mm,
what kind of touch I like or how I want to touch you. Oh, that's what made me think of the blowjob. Me doing it the way I wanted to do
yeah.
it was, this is how I want to touch you, or um, I'm a big fan of timed things. People kind of think that's funny, but bringing your timer into the bedroom can be really, really fun.
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of people have a hard time relaxing when they're receiving oral sex because they think, oh, I'm taking too long, or like, oh,
Mm,
he must be bored, or she must be bored, or like, oh, this is, it's getting, it's my turn to give now. Like,
yeah.
but if you just set the timer and you're like, look, I'm going to go down on you for 15 minutes,
Mm,
and then you go down on
yeah.
me for 15 minutes, or
Yeah.
let's just play with this new thing for 15 minutes and see how we like it, or let's, it can be really fun.
Absolutely.
It kinda takes off a lot of pressure in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are in their head way too much.
Totally.
Mm.
Um, where did you learn about the vagus nerve? Like, where can people access
Uh,
that?
I stumbled on a website that was about singing because I was obsessed with the whole sound thing. And I had an agenda. And like, seriously, I've been wanting a scientist to come and like stick electrodes on me and sort of actually scientifically measure what I know to be true about this ability. It's like bellows on a fire to keep it going. It's very much this sound thing, and I would get to the point of screaming, at times, and that sometimes didn't go down well. Sometimes I
I'm
scare
sure.
people scare people away.
Yeah.
Um, but so it was a bit of this, bit of that. Um, Mainly through the stuff I learned about bonobos and chimpanzees, and uh, the idea that there's only certain other animals that do have orgasm, and they tend to make noise. And it's a device to let other potential mates know that she's in season, and also that whoever wants her has stiff competition because there's great sex going on, so they better
Yeah.
up their game. So it becomes this sort of alpha contest between the males competing for the female. And she's so adept at this whole mating thing that her body actually kind of selects the superior sperm, and orgasm facilitates the sperm creating conceptions. So that's a cool thing about going on the journey of my podcast. Sort of brought me around this. Not only is reproduction not about, or survival of the fittest, not about a male construct around sex, but it always seemed like so long as the penis enters the vagina, that's the important thing. But it's the way women are and the way we behave and our enjoyment of it, and the secretions and the orgasm and everything like that helps conception, helps
Mhm.
reproduction outstandingly. I also came across a book. I didn't actually read the book, but I found an excerpt of it, and it's called Raising the Skirt, The Unsung Story of the Vagina, by Catherine Blackledge.
Sounds
And she's
fun.
got, so she's actually got a lot of information about conception. And I think when you get into the science of it, then you get into finding out which of your hormones and which of the brain synapses and everything, what's firing up in the brain during orgasm. So that's the root. So listen to the podcast. I haven't got it off the top of my head, but I list or go to the show notes or whatever, because I've listed a few websites and stuff on there. And also I would recommend a person called or a website called Self-Cervix.
Yeah.
And her entire focus, it's terrible, her name's gone right off my top of my head. Having a senior moment. Olivia, right. She's unlocking the potential of the cervix as an orgasmic trigger. And
hugely powerful.
Yeah. And like when I had to have a hysterectomy many years ago, and the person who was conducting the operation said, "Do you want to keep your cervix or not?" And I said, "Well, I'm pretty sure that my cervix, has a good deal to do with my sexual potential and satisfaction." And she said to me, "Well, the jury's kind of out about that." And I wanted to grab her by the lapels and said, "Why don't you know the truth?" So yeah.
I didn't know that sometimes they took it out. How do they even, I don't even know how they would do that. That is so crazy to me.
Yeah. So
My
it's
cervical orgasms, they're the best.
yeah. And I experienced my first one during being in labor with my second child, and having sex directly, like 4 weeks after the delivery of my second child. Whatever went on during that labor opened something within me, so that the first time that we had sex, rather than being a little bit trepidatious because it was 4 weeks since I'd given birth, I had my legs up over his shoulders, and he couldn't get like deeper. Oh my god, it was a whole other thing. So yeah, there is no end to the enjoyment and possibilities of what female bodies are capable of.
Yeah.
I think all bodies probably.
Yeah.
But this is just speaking from experience.
Yeah. Cool.
And everything I've said up until now is my opinion.
Yeah.
It's not science. Yeah. It is, but it's also like it's an educated opinion.
Okay. I have 4 more questions for you, and then we're done. I want to ask all of them. Do you mind? How much time do you have?
Fine.
Okay.
I've got, no, it's.
They don't have to be long answers, so it's up to you. Right. What's been the most surprising thing you've learned as you've gotten older about sex and sexuality?
Probably the whole adjusting to and embracing celibacy. So it's interestingly that it's the opposite thing, I think, because that's surprised me, because I'm coming from a very slutty background. And when people would say, quite often I would meet guys who were like voluntarily celibate, and because their heart was broken and they hadn't had sex for 2 years and stuff. And I broke more droughts than I can count. Like that was just because I was like, bad to admit, but I was kind of like, challenge accepted.
Totally.
But yeah, I'll make it better. It's all good. But that was a different me back then. But yeah, it's not just loving and embracing the fact that whether or not someone wants to have sex with me doesn't matter anywhere near as much as, or being thought of as sexually desirable doesn't matter. It's nice, but it doesn't matter. And I know that I went through too much of my life wanting to be desired universally by all living things, or at least men and women equally, and all that sort of stuff. So, and I thought that was important. And society tells us that that's our main currency as human beings, but as women more specifically, our desirability. If someone wants to have sex with us, that makes us an important human being in some way, that more important than if we weren't. So now embodying this elder thing and thinking about getting older and being okay, not just okay with being older, but being okay with being old, which is a whole different thought. Like up until 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought I'm getting old. I would always correct people, just saying, no, I'm just getting older. But physically, my body is changing and my abilities and all that sort of stuff. And there's certain things I won't do or experience just because I'm more restricted, because I'm getting old. And that's kind of liberating. So that's, to me, that's really, really surprising, because I'm okay not disappearing, but I'm okay not being looked at in a certain way. And I'm okay waking up with myself, cuddling myself, masturbating, keeping myself to a regular routine for my mental health and physical health with masturbating, and just generally feeling really, really satisfied and happy with who I am as a human being, completely and utterly outside of my worth as a sexual being. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I was going to ask you if that was liberating, to let go of
It
that,
is.
like,
And it is the
that
letting go.
society says to be desired.
Yeah, it is a letting go. And it's, I realize that it's even though it feels like it's a superficial thing, I think for me, I've always attached my self-worth to it. I've always attached, love to it, even though I was okay at having sex for its own sake. There was still this little girl inside me that was still like feeling very sensitive to rejection and wanting to be the captain of sex. Like, yeah, I didn't really succeed at anything in my life, but I'm good at sex, and I felt like that was a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
I measured my self-worth to that. No, not anymore. And while I really, really want to encourage and hopefully coach people into becoming more empowered and help them on their journey, I hope that runs parallel with and how's your self-worth outside of this experience, and how are you feeling as a person, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I want to point, like, to me, being sexually empowered doesn't mean having lots of sex. It could, but I feel like your choice to be celibate also comes from a sexually empowered place.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my next question flows right into that, which is, how important do you think your sexuality is to your happiness and fulfillment in life?
It's part of me, regardless of the fact that I'm not motivated by sex. I can't not be a sexual being. And I like to party with it occasionally. As we were talking before we went on air, absolutely thrilled to bits that Evelyn Chan shared a reel of mine, which is me playfully being a sexual being, and people respond to it like, oh wow, she's an older woman and she's a sexy older woman. And I'm like, if you feel more kindly towards older women for that reason, that's okay. I'm okay with that. But if people want to actually follow me on Instagram or whatever and come on my journey as a result of that, seeing me, that you're also going to see me with no makeup on, not dancing around. You're gonna see the empowerment of someone who really loves being a woman, but doesn't necessarily want to fit into any kind of stereotype around that idea. I'm still navigating this. I'm still exploring this. I mean, really enjoying exploring what it means to be getting old and having fun with it and expressing my protective instinct with impunity because people expect it now. It's less of an imposition. If you say something to someone just by virtue of being older, people are more predisposed to softening their approach and not being defensive about you caring. Sometimes women will say things to each other out of caring, and another woman will think, you don't think I know how to look after myself. You don't think I know this. You don't think I, but I find young women, when I talk to them, they kind of soften towards me because they don't feel like they have to reject any of my advice. They know they can take it with a grain of salt. And when it comes across as something that they, oh my God, I actually really needed to hear that, it's a cool thing. There's, you know, it's a cool thing getting older. Yeah.
You're finding the pros of it.
Mm.
I feel like we hear a lot about the cons of getting older, and it's just presented to us as a bad thing. But I think there's a lot of pros, a lot of good things about getting
Well,
older.
particularly the whole aesthetic thing. That seems to be the major thing, major
Yeah.
con
Yeah.
associated with it. And um, I am pro women doing whatever they want to with their bodies and whatever makes them happy and all this sort of stuff. But I also feel like, for myself, I feel like it's my duty to not care about getting older, having wrinkles, going grey, all that sort of stuff, just in case it makes people feel better about getting older, rather than thinking, oh, I can't afford those great creams and serums and treatments and Botox. I can't afford to do that. So I'm going to get ugly and old. And I'm like, I look in the mirror and I love who I see because I know who she is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were saying a little bit earlier that you're finding that being desired by everybody on the planet
Yeah. I think we all
doesn't.
think that deep down, don't we? We just want to be like, yeah, you want this.
But you're discovering that that doesn't really matter.
Mm.
What does matter?
While I don't take myself too seriously, I really don't, and I go to a lot of trouble not to take myself too seriously, it matters to me to be taken seriously when I want to be taken seriously. So I reject the fact that I'm no longer relevant because I'm older. I reject the idea that I've got nothing to bring to the table in conversations like the one we're having, presumably just because I'm no longer aesthetically matching the conversation that we're having. You know, like, people might tune in and I don't know. People might be thinking, well, what do we care what a nearly 60-year-old woman thinks about sex? She's dried up and shriveled up anyway. That's the kind of shitty idea we have about getting
That
older.
would be their loss. But
Yeah. That's the absolute. So for me to be like really out there talking about self-pleasure, self-love, all of these sort of things, expressing my sexuality, like Eartha Kitt, man, she was still doing it right up until her 70s, and she was still rocking it, and she was still telling interviewers where to go if they dare underestimate her. She was just such a powerful force of nature, and she knew it and she embodied it. And it was always her right, and it was an indisputable fact about her. That's goals. A woman like her is goals for everybody else.
Yeah.
To just be like, have such a strong sense of who you are that no one else's opinion of you matters, but I can still be triggered by people saying things a specific way, particularly in conversations with men. I can be triggered by just not being taken seriously, or having people presume they know things that they don't know.
That's really interesting that you feel like people might not take you seriously because of your age.
Mm.
Because I feel like I'm too young for people to take me seriously.
How old are you?
34.
Mm.
So I think, well, when like after 15 years of doing this and I'm 50, people are going to take me seriously. And so that's really interesting. Maybe just no matter what age you are, maybe it just doesn't fucking matter. And there's always going to be a percentage of the population that doesn't take you seriously for whatever reason, because you
So
don't
in
look.
what way don't you feel you're being taken seriously, or that you don't have
I don't know. I always just
the
imagine that
runs?
people would say, "Oh, she's 34. What does she know? Like, she doesn't. She only has like she doesn't have like a life of experience, or
All right.
stuff like that." Like
Yeah.
I'd be too young to be taken seriously
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of too old to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were in my shoes, what question would you have asked you that I didn't?
I guess maybe ask me how I mothered my children in regards to teaching them about sexuality and embodying sexuality to young boys and men. So
Yes,
how I modeled female behavior, and whispered into their ear as they were going on a date, maybe to sort of
please. Please go there. I have a 4-year-old son, and I want to know what you did.
Well, with anyone under a certain age, I'd get onto comprehensive consent on Instagram. She's absolutely fantastic, and already like learning body autonomy needs to start as early as possible.
Yeah.
So that's something. If I had my time over again, I would be less inclined to tell my kids to cuddle their relatives and all the stuff that
Yes.
we now know is a consent violation and can mess kids up a bit, because of that obligation to make other people happy all the time. But mainly it was, I didn't necessarily shield my kids from watching TV or anything that had sex scenes in it, or allusions. I'd be more inclined to shield them from violence than sex. And use any excuse to have a conversation. So if someone is telling a joke on a TV show and it's about sex and my kid laughs, I'd say, "What? And can you tell me why you think that's funny? Do you know what that joke was actually about?" So just look at any excuse to have a conversation indirectly.
Yep.
So just be aware of, if they're at a friend's place and they saw a movie that I might not necessarily have approved of, and what did you think the movie was about? And just just open conversation. And very early on in the piece, when they were young, South Park was born not long after I had kids. And I didn't even know what South Park was. We started watching it with kids. It's a cartoon, and then suddenly realized it's an adult cartoon. And still having conversations around stuff, because it was pretty full on. And they were, at the time I just had the two, and they were like 8, 11, or 9 and 12 watching the show. So at an age where they're going to get curious anyway. So when they're joking about anything to do with sexuality or sex or anything like that. I'd be like, after the show, well, why did you think that was funny? And or is there anything you didn't understand or whatever?
Yeah.
And kids are inclined to sort of go, I don't really want to talk about it. But I normalized it a lot. Also, in regards to making noise, I'm not sure if this is emotionally scarring to my kids, but I never really muffled sounds when they were young. It just like, I'm living with your father, and this is like this is our jungle, and the bonobos are in the tree, in this tree, and you're like, this is the environment in which you're growing up. I haven't really quizzed them much on whether it had a detrimental effect or whatever, but I just know how much respect and how affectionate my two older boys are with their partners. And now that my boys are even older, like the two older ones are in their 30s now, we can have academic conversations around sex.
Yep.
that are about feminism and stuff. So, but when they were teenagers or whatever, I would just like, particularly one of my kids was more outgoing, more adventurous as a teenager, and I would just be like, don't presume, never presume that someone who is having sex with you on the night they meet you, don't presume that they know that it's a one night thing. Have that conversation. If that's what your intention is, have that conversation and give them the option. And I think that's the only direct, overt conversation that I had around really asserting something towards them, like, this is something I need to tell you. I really, really need to tell you. And never, ever think, if someone's had sex with you, that there's anything about that person that is of a lesser character or anything like that. Like saying the way you feel about sex, your desire for sex, your need for sex, all that sort of stuff. Women are the same. Women are wired the same.
Yeah.
And just making that clear. And then them going, yeah, I know, shut up. That was it. But I made sure I got it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm happy to say that at times, like for my 50th birthday, I had a roast, and my eldest son roasted me. And the fact that I used to have a sex advice column and stuff when I was writing, and he said, "Oh," made a joke like, people, know my mum, is interested in sex and writing about sex, and quite often she used to say to me, "Alex, sex, sex, sexity, sex, sexy sex, sexy sex, sex, sexity, sex, sex, sex." And as if to say that's literally all I used to talk about. So he'd take the piss out of me. And I just loved that he was doing it affectionately so, and that they love me and accept me, and wouldn't have me any other way. Interestingly, the only time I do have slight cringy moments in my life, or slight embarrassed moments in my life, is that little voice that won't quite shut up, and that is, what will your children think? But the older I get, interestingly, the easier it is to suppress the voice,
I mean,
because it's easy for
now that you could just ask them.
there. Exactly. And it's also like, when does my life get to be my life? When do my decisions get to be my decision? When does me being a woman not mean that I'm not also a mother? And when does being a mother not mean I'm also a woman? So, for better or worse, they've seen me at my worst emotionally and brokenhearted in relationships, and they've seen everything that I've gone through, and they've helped me be, they've let me lean on them from time to time, and all that sort of stuff. So I think just demanding to be seen as a human being was always on my agenda. And I, I think that their boundaries may have been crossed at different times just because I was quite overt and stuff, and it was a bit hard for them to deal with. But overall, I think a lot of that is still part of just society's shame attached to sex being a thing that is wrong, that is bad, that makes people morally bankrupt, or that me as a woman should behave a certain way. And so I'm learning to let go. I've let go of a lot of things in my life, but I'm always still letting go of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea that mothers should not be sexual.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And motherhood is the sexiest thing you'll ever do. So maybe not. Maybe not. But the sensuality of all of that, if it doesn't put you more in touch with your primal human qualities, nothing will, sort of thing. So just seeing ourselves as human beings and being like all other animals, but also not forgetting that we've got these amazing complex brains. That means we can control our urges. We've got to balance that. We've got to teach all of it from a very young age. Everything, psychology, emotions, romance, all of that stuff. That should be taught in school, and all the other stuff should be at the end of the day. Okay, let's do an hour of maths, an hour of English. Let's teach you how to be a human being and navigate the world.
Yeah, like we are first and foremost human beings interacting with other human beings. So
and reacting and getting hurt and having
important.
no idea. You would think.
Yeah, you would think.
But then capitalism doesn't really care about that. They just want to put us on the hamster wheel and help us make money for people who want to make a lot of money. Oh, hippies. What are you going to do?
Okay, my last question for you is what's one thing you wish you knew as a teenager about sex and sexuality? It might be something you've already said. But if you could go back in time and tell yourself something, what would it be?
That just because someone thinks you are sexually attractive doesn't mean you're special. Doesn't mean there's anything outstanding about you, anything particularly more lovable about you, or anything at all. That your capacity to love and be loved is about people wanting to spend time with you and getting to know you and sharing a laugh with you and turning up and being reliable and being dependable and all of that stuff. And that this romantic and idealized, sexualized idea we have around love and sex being mutually inclusive, while it's a beautiful thing to have both, women are fed this idea that we are just waiting to be chosen. We're waiting to be seen as better than other people, as more beautiful, as more sexy, and plucked from the obscurity of our own mediocrity in our own heads, and just be completely and utterly glorified by one human being who has chosen us. And that's, there's some wonderful feminists out there that I look up to, that I know are putting this out there into the world, and I will always elevate their voices as well, like Evelyn's, and just treat myself as my own best friend. If I had my time over again, I wouldn't have given a shit what the haters thought. I wouldn't have been easily led. I wouldn't have been easily influenced. I wouldn't have been easily seduced. I wouldn't have been easily coerced. I wouldn't have been so many things. So,
You're none of those things if you first and foremost belong to yourself and love yourself. Like, you'll be your own person.
yeah,
Know your own self
yeah,
and speak your own mind.
yeah. Just and to appreciate other people, like you appreciate yourself, but really, really see people,
Mhm.
really, really appreciate people, see the pain they're in.
Yeah,
It's not until you learn a bit about, human fragility that one day you just look around and you really, really see people and you see their pain. If you're empathic in any way, you feel their pain. And it just brings out a kinder version of yourself that
it's true.
is not so self-obsessed with your own insecurities anymore. I think it's kind of an obsession, being constantly worried about, oh, do people like me? Like, are you likable? If you are, then be do something with your life.
Yes.
Mm,
We have no idea what people's lives and their inner lives are like.
yeah.
And you just get a glimpse sometimes and you're like, wow. I don't know. Everybody has a story and there's good reasons why everybody is the way they are.
Mm, yeah.
And
That's
people
what I
are
like
like,
about the sorry.
about the
I was
way.
just going to say that's what I like about the relationship I have now with my adult children, is they've lived a life, and it's the conversations we have are at greater depth, because when they're teenagers they tend to dismiss what you have to say, and over time things occur to them, and when you give them the opportunity to experience your vulnerability in exchange for theirs, it's absolutely it's not, it's so little talked about, is getting to have an adult relationship with the people that you gave birth to. It's far and away probably the most rewarding thing about being a parent, is
I can't wait.
seeing and knowing the human being they are, and how they love and what they value, and it's awesome. Mm,
I feel so touched by that. I feel like
mm,
people don't talk about that. And a lot of times what I see is people drift away from their kids as they become adults because they no longer have dictatorship over them. And so, oh, now they can argue with their kids and
yeah, it's
they don't
heartbreaking,
like
isn't it?
that. And it like damages their egos or something. And so they just get further and further away from their
Mm,
kids. So I love hearing you say that. Like, just the way you explain that is so beautiful.
mm.
Like,
It's
I desire
don't
that
take it for
with my
granted.
kids
Yeah, yeah.
for sure. Like, just to talk to them and find out who they are and what they think. And
Well, you're right in that it's not something that we talk about that much. And I know that when they were getting to be of an age when they learned to drive and they were going to parties on their own and all that sort of stuff, as a parent, you go, "Oh shit! Actually, before I had kids, I didn't really take this bit into consideration. I didn't really know this was coming, and it messes with you a bit because you've got one job: protect that kid, keep it alive. That's the whole thing from the moment they're born. Keep that baby alive, nurture that baby, keep it alive.
yep,
That's the job description. And when they're out of your sight, you've got no control over that, and that's that's a hefty thing. But now that they're getting older, we're reconnecting, because there's definitely got to be a separation period
yeah,
where they learn about life their own way, and you let them and
yeah.
make their mistakes and all that sort of stuff, and don't sit on there. Don't sit behind them and go, don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. No, I wasn't really the best advice giver then. But in the last 10 years or so, now that I'm getting further and further away from all of my insecurities and pain and trauma and grief and all that sort of stuff. And now that it's all ebbing away, I've got all the time in the world to have the conversations that are about being a human being rather than doing any finger pointing in either direction, or, where parents sometimes look at kids as a version of themselves, and they really put a lot of stake on that kid's success being a failure or a success to them.
Yeah.
Don't make the mistakes I did, and the relationship becomes really overbearing, and it's a protective instinct gone, completely warped.
Yeah.
It results in all that conflict, but it really is protective instinct not knowing how to express itself in a calm, rational way. But yeah, having conversations now with them, just and listening to them have conversations with each other. That's awesome. That's so cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm.
Where can people find you that are listening?
Okay, so I have a homepage, theeloquentintheroom.com. So that's a landing page where I have got some blog posts. I have my bios on there. There's some podcast episodes on there. I'm on YouTube at The Eloquent in the Room. I'm on Twitter at The Rose Cooper, but it says The Eloquent in the Room. And I'm on Instagram as The Eloquent in the Room. So yeah, Google The Eloquent in the Room, and yeah, you'll find me.
I love that that's your handle. I think it's so clever. Instead of the elephant in the room, because you talk about things that people don't talk about, right?
That's the idea.
That's the idea behind it.
And the harder and more squirmy the thing. I think the whole elephant in the room is the thing that no one wants to talk about, but you can't get on with anything unless you do. It's the obstacle.
I love those things the most. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom.
Me too, sir.
And your energy and everything with me and with my listeners. It's been so amazing. I've loved having you on.
Yeah, you're so sweet. Thank you so much. I enjoy it, and I love the energy you put up is just like, she's so chill.
That's good.
She's so chill. She's just so relaxing. So it's hard not to just go, okay, let's go as far as I want to go.
Yeah.
And then I've pushed myself a bit further with this interview and gone a bit further with giving more.
I appreciate it. I love it. Thank you.
No worries. No worries.